Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. I have a part of our series called the CEO Support Series. And today, my guest, Adi Klevit, is with us to talk about some of what I find is to be some of the most important underpinnings in a successful business or a successful agency, particularly when it comes time for an acquisition or the stress that comes on a business when they're looking to grow rapidly. So Adi, I'm super excited and happy to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Todd. It's great to be here. And, you and I, you were a guest on my podcast. We had a great podcast, and I'm excited about continuing the conversation.
Yeah, and I will say I get a lot of comments back from listeners about the CEO Support Series. A lot of times we talk about transactions, but there's a lot of other things that help in this podcast that are just good insights and tools for listeners. So if you would, give me a quick introduction to you and the business and the type of people you serve most often.
Sure. So I'm a process consultant. I'm all about processes. I love bringing order and organization to companies. So we serve fast-growing companies that are lacking consistency. That's who we work with. We work with successful entrepreneurs that are growing, are scaling, are adding people to their team. They have leads coming in, they have prospects, they're doing well. But, they got to a certain point and then they need to get to the next level, and they know that in order to get there, they have to be organized. They have to have processes and systems in place. They got there by whatever systems that serve them so far, but they know that in order to make the leap to the next step, to the next level, they need systems. Or if the company wants, let's say they're looking at an exit. So we work also with companies that want to exit in 3 to 5 years from now. And they want to have things documented and systematized and the house in really good order so they can actually get the best out of the transactions. So those are the types of companies that we work with.
And when you start with a company, every company has systems and they have processes. And many of them are perhaps just from default. But when you start with somebody, where do you see I guess I'll call it the low-hanging fruit, some of the most immediate things that pay dividends from a corporate perspective, from an entrepreneurial perspective?
Absolutely. So, it's not one size fit all. I actually learned it from another guest of my podcast that he said one size fit one. And that's the way that it's a great saying, right? Because there is no blanket answer to this, but I always start from that point, and I'll tell you how. So the first thing when we engage with a client, yes, they do have systems, because by default, there is always a process. And that's exactly what I tell people. You have a process. When you wake up in the morning, I bet you have the same process almost every morning, right? You make your coffee probably the same way. You don't go and make the coffee different ways every single day. You have your routine, you have your process, you have the way that you do things. So you do have systems. What we do is we document it so that it can be consistent, so it can be, you can replicate it, you can continue to do it over and over, you can train better, you can pass the knowledge, etc. So when we start working with a company, the first thing that we do is we map the high-level processes across the company. And then we look at it, and I ask the question, what area of the company, if you had well-documented processes and procedures, will give you the biggest return on investment? And return on investment is not always in terms of profit. Of course, it has to be translated to profit at the end, but it really is, what is it that you're trying to gain? If you're a busy entrepreneur and you're trying to gain another 10 hours in your day, great. Let's take a look at which process, if you had it documented and you can pass it on to somebody else or do it more effectively, you will be able to gain those 10 hours in a day.
And
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I know you do this for lots and lots of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a repetitive theme in there that you see most often when people start to talk about those systems? Is it, to make it up, is it in HR? Is it in finance? Is it in sales? Are there consistencies you see all the time?
It's really again, it depends, right? Because I see it in HR, I see it in accounting, I see it in sales, I see it in operations. The common denominator is really the why, right? What I see is problem training, like it's an area that is expanding. They're hiring new people. We need to train them right now. So it's training and onboarding. Another common denominator is that you have an employee that has been there for a long time, or they develop some kind of a system that you do not know what the system is. And that can be dangerous. It's risk mitigation. You want to know how that person does that thing. So they send us there in order to actually extract the information.
That's pretty interesting, right? Because I hired a sales guy and then another guy. Now I got a few sales guys. And I know that they're selling. I don't necessarily know how they're selling, right? And so is that an example of what you're talking about? To 100%. Go processize that?
Yeah, I mean, let's say Don, one of them, like the best one leaves tomorrow. You hire a new person, how are you going to train them if you don't know what the selling system is, right? Mm-hmm. But imagine if you actually downloaded all the information, like you actually have all the information from that guy's head, but also you systematize it, so you approve of it. It's something that you teach the other salespeople, and then you use it in order to train a new person. So that person lives, okay, so what? I mean, of course, it's going to be a loss because that person it's not all about the process. It's also about the people, for sure. But it's so much less stressful because you know that you can hire somebody that has good people skills, good communication, things that you cannot really teach them necessarily, but then you can teach them the process and you can teach them the scripts.
And not having that system obviously would cause some bottlenecks in an organization. Is there a common place that is most likely bottlenecked because of that?
Again, it's really unique, but some of the areas are the areas where when it passes from one process to another. For example, from sales to operation or sales to fulfillment, there is always a miscommunication. I mean, not always, but many times what I see is the miscommunication or the lack of communication. And if there is a clear process on how to do that handoff,
between really disciplines.
Between disciplines, that's right. And also internally, right? Because you think about it, you have a person that is doing, like, let's say the salesperson you gave an example of. So they know what they're doing. They're there every day. The problem is when they're not there. But if they're there, let's assume that they know what they're doing and they're not necessarily going to create their own bottleneck, although it can happen as well. But when it comes to communication to other departments, that can be a bottleneck. And that is an area that I see that is very common.
Got it. I wonder, do you have an example or a case study, obviously without names if you're most comfortable that way, to give a sense of the before and after picture, if you will?
Absolutely. So, I have many of those. So one case study was a company that came to us because they didn't have that. They were growing very fast. They had a very aggressive goals of growing, and they were not able to train fast enough because the training was being done one-on-one. We created a whole manual for their customer service training, and they were able to bring 3 people and train them in literally they cut 75% of the training time. So in 25% of the time that it took before to actually train them and get up and running.
And tell me on a granular level, how does that happen? Do you go to somebody's site? Do you talk to all the people? How does it happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have a team of people. It's not just me. That's why, we are a team in the company that we work on it. So we have consultants that basically do the interview and analyze the flows and ask the questions and extract the information. We record it. We ask you, let's say I'm doing it with you. So we say, okay, Todd, so tell me about your company. We'll map it. We'll figure out where we're starting, where is the low-hanging fruit. Let's say we identified it's sales. Good. So now we'll ask you, Todd, who do you in your sales department would you like to clone? And you'll tell me Jim. All right, good. So we're going to meet with Jim. We might meet with you as well, because it might be you, the owner, that basically were never able to pass that hat to somebody else. Mm-hmm. So we're going to meet with you on a regular basis, once a week. That's a good cadence. And we are going to, after we map the procedure or the process, we're basically going to chunk it, and we're going to address its chunk in a meeting. You're going to teach us as if though you are training us. We ask a lot of questions. We're very fast. We extract the information. We take it. Then we have technical writers that create the procedures, and we take that video and we cut it to small videos. So we also use video excerpts. We use screenshots. We write it, and we write it in the language that is the language of the organization, within the culture and core values of that organization. So it is very tailor-made for you. So that's the way we create it. But then we also take it and we train the rest of your people on it. So let's say Jim is one salesperson, but then you have Annette, Sarah, and Jasmine as your other sales representatives. Good. So then we meet with them and we have them read what we worked out with Jim, ask for feedback, make any additions or any changes, and then have them all read it again, because they need to know what is in there, right? And then the process continues in terms of the follow by all. We make sure that people are actually using it, that they are making it part of their culture, that you are using the processes in order to resolve issues, that we eliminate those, oh, now this is the way it's been always been done, this is why we are doing it, right? But we really ask and dig in and figure out why it is being done, and perhaps offering some improvement and some ways to make it more efficient. We set up a very specific schedule for review of the processes, because it's not enough to create the processes one time. They have to be alive. They have to be changed, because processes do change. You know, we're always the business is alive. You know, it's a live organism, right? So you add a new software, you change a new process, you add a new line of business, you realize that this works or this doesn't work. So we also implement a very robust system of making sure the processes are up to date and are being reviewed and revised when needed.
You know, it's interesting because companies that we work on transactions for will typically trade at a higher multiple when they have IP, right? Intellectual property. And most people assume that means some type of software. And intellectual property, I think in many cases, is what you just described, right? There's a reason why the company is successful, oftentimes because of their output or what they can produce for their customers. And to be able to do that repetitively can be because of a piece of software. It could be because of a manual. It could be because of training. It could be because of a few different things, I suspect. What I see is that clients that are buttoned down like that tend to create a lot more confidence in the future buyer of a business or an investor if it's private equity, because of that infrastructure that they've taken the time to not only document, but typically when you document something, you think a lot more about it and you add to it and you get other people's perspective to it and on and on. Do you see the same thing?
Absolutely. You know, I had a client that had a painting company and he decided to sell it. And he wanted me to be there in the meeting with the buyer, with the prospective buyer. And so I can talk over the manual, explain it, etc. And you should see the eyes of the buyer when he saw that. It was incredible to see that, because his confidence, and all of a sudden he started talking, more to my client, right? And be more interested because he saw the potential right there. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. How did he see it? Do you create a manual? Is it online?
It's online. It's online. All the documentations that we do, we have to keep up with, people use things online, right? The online manual can be printed some people like it on paper. It can be laminated. It can be done doing all of that. But everything is cloud-based. You can pick it up on your iPad, on your phone, on the computer, on the desktop, wherever you are, because you have to do that. We deal with companies that have people out in the field. We have companies, that people work from home, but it has to be accessible.
Sure. Yes. What happens when I'm thinking about acquisition now? One of the most important things about an acquisition is the integration of that acquisition. And so I can certainly see where having all that documented is clearly helpful.
Yeah.
What happens when those guys have a process and you have a process? How do you accommodate and then take the best of both worlds when there's two things coming together?
It really depends. It depends. I know I'm answering a lot. It really depends because it's really every company, every acquisition is different. It's what is it that the sides agreed upon, right? If you are completely I give you an example. I work with several companies that went into that integration from the people that got acquired that wanted all of their processes documented so they will get a higher price for the acquisition, and and the company that actually acquired another company that actually brought us in order to document what was already existing. So
at the company they bought.
They bought. Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that you have to have the things documented on paper or electronically so you can actually take a look at it. You have to, and also map. So then you understand this process and that process, because if that doesn't exist, like I work with a company that actually integrated several companies, they acquired several companies, and then they became basically one company out of probably 4 or 5. And it was a mess because they did it this way, they had this software, they did it this way, right? But they didn't have it documented. So it was kind of all this verbal confusion. If you have it documented, let's say, for just sake of simplicity, let's say there are 2 bakeries. One of them makes blueberry pie and the other one makes apple cake, okay? And now we want to make a new line of business that makes blueberry apple cake, right? But it integrates the knowledge of both. Okay, so if you take the 2 chefs and they start arguing or explaining each other, it can create a lot of turmoil, a lot of confusion. If you have a flow chart with all the ingredients, with all the steps that you take, the time that it takes to create each one, who are your suppliers, etc., all very well systematized and documented. It's all a matter of sitting next to basically sitting next to each other, putting everything on a table and looking and go, okay, well, this is how we integrate it. We consolidate to this supplier to buy everything. And then we are going to get rid of one of the ovens that we have. We're going to only keep this one. This is the line we're going to do. We're going to buy this one. I mean, you're going to cut the apples. You're going to put the blueberries. It's kind of like you can integrate it together when you know what exists in both sides.
Yeah, I can see where that's valuable. How, I would imagine, I think about many of the people that I work with, and it's going fine. So I would imagine it's relatively easy to help someone where they have a problem. I'm thinking about the guys that think it's fine. What are some of the first indicators that somebody like you could have impact in an organization and make it more efficient and streamlined and successful and all those things I know you do?
Yeah, the majority of our clients, when we engaged with them the first time, those are visionaries. Those are people that actually see the vision of if they had well-documented processes and procedures, where they can take the business to the next level. So they don't necessarily have a problem, but they also are smart enough to anticipate so the problem doesn't happen if they actually expand and grow, right? So that's one thing, is you really have to have a vision towards the future. Where do you want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Todd, and you and I discussed it on my podcast. You have to look into the future and start talking to you so you can actually build the future with them, because it doesn't happen. That exit strategy doesn't happen within one day, right? I mean, that acquisition doesn't happen within a day. You have to be prepared for it. So if you have the vision and you know what are the different things that you have to have in an organization, you will start acting on it. It's kind of like, let's say you have a good set of books, but they're not perfect. Okay, you get by, but would you be able to sell? Would you be able to really engage in a good transaction if you don't have everything cleaned up? Probably not. So you're going to go and talk to a fractional CFO. You're going to clean the books. You're going to do whatever you need to do. Same thing with processes. But some of the indicators are, do you have an employee that all the knowledge sits in their head? Do you have an employee right now that if they didn't show up to work tomorrow, you're going to be screwed? You know, you're going to have orders you can't fulfill. You're going to have irate customers. You're going to have a problem. You're not going to be able to basically maintain. You're going to somehow get by because we all do, but is it going to be a real emergency? Another one is, are you really able to take a vacation for 2 weeks straight with no answering a phone or email or anything else? Can you do that? Whether you want to do it or not, it's a different story, but can you really do it? You know?
Yeah, it's a great measure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you that. What would you say? And again, I hear voices in my head, like all of us do. And one of them is that, especially your first point, because I do have employees here that have a lot of knowledge and I'm not exactly sure what all of it is. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sit down with them and start to collect that knowledge. Is that a good idea or not a good idea?
Fantastic idea. You got to do it. You absolutely have to do it.
And why would why would you be more qualified than me? Would people tell you different things than they would tell me? Would they be afraid to tell me the bad things and not the good thing? You know, what's your experience there?
Yeah, we actually surveyed our clients. And I always ask my clients, why don't you do it yourself? So, you know, it is a bandwidth.
What do they say to you when you ask them that?
Well, it's okay. So it's bandwidth, right? I mean, you know, it's been on their to-do list for a long time. It never get done. We get it done within months. You know, it's done. You know, I'm really good at bookkeeping. I can probably do my own taxes. Will I ever do it? Absolutely not. You know, why do I have a housekeeper? Can I clean my house? Absolutely. Probably better. Probably it's going to be like to my standards, right? Am I going to spend time doing that? No, I don't have the time, right? So it's time, because that's what we do. You know, it's just like, you know, I really believe that you stay in your lane, in your superpower zone, in your genius zone. Go and produce more money and pay us to do that as opposed to doing it, right? Some people just hate doing it, especially creative people. There was a whole process. I don't want to talk about it. I get excited about it.
And I will say this, if all of my clients had that, I would be thrilled, because it makes it easier to sell, number one, with a better result. It's part of due diligence, and you can upload it and share it, and all that is better.
But John, I also want to mention something else on that. You asked me why, because not all of us are wired to write processes. Some people are so creative and they will thrive in creating something, but writing processes, they will just write 100 pages where we can just do it in like, you know, a very concise and to the point, and being able to understand and duplicate. So there are people that are very good at that. There are people that are not. So that's also another reason.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is something's better than nothing, but you don't have to settle for something. You could settle for something really good and effective and efficient. And it's an investment in the depth and quality of the organization, of your people, right? Of all those kind of things.
Absolutely.
So that certainly seems to make a lot of sense. If somebody wanted to learn more about what it is that you do, because I will say, you know, this is the second time that you and I have had the chance to talk, and as I hear you more and listen more, it becomes more and more of a no-brainer, right? To really get things done, and certainly to have it done from an outside perspective of the business, from somebody that has done it multiple times, so knows what a good procedure and process looks like. How could somebody learn a little bit more, and then how could somebody get in contact with you if they wanted to?
Sure. So we put a lot of content out there. So the best way is you can go to our website, which is it's www.bizsuccesscg.com. So it's B-I-Z, the word success spelled out, CG for consultinggroup.com. I put a blog out there every week. I have a podcast 6 times a month with great guests like yourself. I have, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can look me up in LinkedIn, Adi Klevit, and you will see information there. And you can also call or text at 503-662-2911. I'll be happy to talk to you. And we also do a free process mapping session to identify where.
Oh, that's great.
where you should start. That's what we do is like, okay, we identify the key processes and really work with you. What are the low hanging fruits that you should start there in order to get the biggest ROI?
Yeah. And if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, you can reach out to Adi in the way she described. If you want to go to secondbitepodcast.com, Jeremy will post all in the show notes, all of Adi's contact information. And it's very easy to reach out and to find her on LinkedIn. But, in this, we spent, a half an hour talking about once you start to get very specific into an individual business, I'm sure you could go for hours and hours, and I'm sure it'd be very fascinating. But this is a great way to kind of cover the topic. So I appreciate you making time and spending time with us. It's great just to learn a little bit more, Adi. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. It was great being a guest here.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.